Alright, enough of that. We're clearly looking at the Amber Ruby Mufasa deck today. So let's get into it. That's right, it's time to check out the Mufasa deck in Disney Lorcana. This deck has been growing in popularity over the last few weeks, so it's time to show off my favorite version of the deck. This video won't be quite as detailed as my other guides, as I still think this deck has a lot of room for testing different cards, and you'll definitely see that later during my gameplay. My list includes a few different ideas compared to some of the other lists floating around, and I think these choices really spice up the list and give it some power against top decks in the meta. I'm a massive fan of the Amber Ruby Ink combo, and I have been since the first chapter. So when Mufasa was revealed going into set 2, I knew I had to make a deck focused on his great ability to bring out new characters when he's banished. This deck uses Mufasa to capitalize on the incredible character strength of Amber Ruby. In the first chapter, I championed this Ink combo as a great alternative mid-range deck that utilized valuable stats and Rapunzel heal combos. In the late game, its characters and actions strung together nicely, but now with Mufasa and other set 2 characters, we can swap out some of the action removal for powerful characters with removal of their own. These cards, as well as other strong on-play characters, really come alive thanks to the pressure from Mufasa. He feels similar to the dominant Merlin Rabbit, who sits there and waits to be removed in order to kick in his Death Rattle ability. But with Mufasa, the pressure can be even greater because he quests for 2 each turn. And although that puts a target on his back, his ability allows him to potentially bring out those insane characters when banished. And because of this, Mufasa is an inevitable 2-for-1, assuming you hit one of your characters. And that's why this deck is filled almost entirely with character cards, and there's a certain element of luck with this deck, as you could pop out a 1-drop Stitch, or your Maleficent Monster's Dragon with your Mufasa. Another vital aspect to this deck that contributes to its success is its fantastic draw engine. Your main tools here are Mother Gothel and Rapunzel. They can clearly be played out on turn 2 or 3 and then 4 for early card draw, but they're also a great pair of cards to play together during any phase of the game. For 6 or less ink, you get to draw 3 cards and place down 2 units with 4 or more willpower. And as a secondary engine, you can use Rockstar Stitch as card draw as well. With all those key combos in mind, let's break down the deck list more. I think there are some clear core cards that will almost always appear in versions of this deck to give it the best chance of success. I'll list them here at the top as this deck's crucial core components. As mentioned previously, we have Mother Gothel and Rapunzel as the deck's primary draw engine, with New Dog Stitch and Rockstar Stitch as the secondary combo for card draw, but also early questing power. Another crucial early game character is Doc. He's your primary turn 3 play, allowing an earlier turn 4 Mufasa or turn 5 Gothel Rapunzel combo. Minnie Mouse Surfer joins Doc as your other 3-cost option. She's a core piece because of her incredible strength in the meta right now, as an early game lore generator that demands a response. As an evasive character, she's also a great target for the Mufasa summon, as she'll come in exerted but usually protected thanks to that keyword. I also include Hades here as a core piece of the deck. This is a bit different, as many decks don't include Hades, but I think that's a big oversight. He provides some of the best insurance against enemy board wipes, not only providing the Hades loop for consistent board presence late game, but he also doubles down on the Mufasa deck identity of powerful on-play character powers, bringing characters like Rapunzel, Maleficent, and Lady Tremaine back to your hand. I can't stress enough how great Hades is in this deck. Remember, this is an overwhelmingly character-focused deck, and that's exactly what Hades wants. He can also bring back Mufasa, of course, furthering his impact in the game. After all, Mufasa is the star of the show here. Another 5-cost staple is Maui. Without Dragonfire or Be Prepared, Maui's source of rush removal is vital against certain matchups. And when paired with Amber, he's a great recipient of Rapunzel heals after he rushes in. Lady Tremaine and Maleficent Monster's Dragon are mid and late game on-play removal characters, some of the best targets for Mufasa to hit, and are great core cards in this deck. Finally, they are joined by Surfer Stitch, another big character that feels great to hit off Mufasa. He serves as a backup card draw source, but is also simply bulky enough to survive most follow-up damage. Now with our core cards discussed, let's walk through several options to add into this foundation to round out the list. First, let's cover some common inclusions for the early game. These are some 1 and 2 cost characters that can serve as adoring fans for Rockstar Stitch. The Queen comes to mind first. She's in pretty much every Mufasa list along with her Floodborn counterpart, and though I agree she's great as a second 1-cost option, an early threat from the shift, and a Rockstar fan, I've been leaving both Queens out of my own lists in favor of stronger Mufasa targets. Simba is another common inclusion. You can't have a Mufasa deck without Simba. Alright, that's not entirely true, but it is true that Simba is Rockstar Stitch's best friend. He can also be used to simply protect characters played out by Mufasa Exerted, which can be crucial. Another 2-cost adoring fan is Queen of Hearts. I particularly like her as an answer to aggro decks and early Steel Song singers like Cinderella. I've found success running 3 Simba and 3 Queen of Heart alongside the 4 Mother Gothel in my 2-cost slot. Another idea that's been rising in popularity is a Snow White package with the 2-cost Snow White plus Floodborn Snow White. I really like the idea here. The 2/3 stat line alone is great into a meta rampant with Let the Storm Rage On and Teeth Inhibitions that want to deal 2 damage early. Having 3 or 4 willpower early on is great, and it's another reason why Simba, Mother Gothel, Doc, Minnie Mouse, and others feel so great to play right now. Snow White is no exception, and Snow White Well-Wisher brings in more character return from the discard, similar to Hades. However, I do highly prefer running 4 copies of Hades and making use of the on-play aspect of his recursion. Lantern is another common choice. If any non-character card is going to make its way into this deck, it would be Lantern. If you find yourself loving how Doc can skip ahead in character tempo with the turn 5 Mufasa and other combos, considering adding a couple copies of Lantern as a backup to Doc for more consistency in that character ramp. I think the only other item worth considering would be Dinner Bell. This would serve as a backup copy of Rapunzel, used to draw 3 cards off Mother Gothel. However, I like being more lean in my Mufasa deck, running with either 58 or all 60 characters, so I like playing either 2 Lanterns or no items at all. One uncommon choice I've been loving is adding in Namari. I don't see this one too often in other lists, but I highly recommend testing her. In a Ruby deck without action removal, she adds some back in herself. She's best used to take out characters like Ursula, Cindy Stouthearted, or pesky evasives like Minnie Mouse. And although it takes a turn for her to come online, that pressure can often mean she demands removal herself from the opponent. Another bonus of Namari in this deck is she can be played out by Mufasa, ready to go next turn, and she can be found again later by Hades. You can't do that with Dragonfire. I've tested out a few other characters as well, such as Floodborn Queen of Hearts, Mickey Friendly Face, and Mickey BLT. Queen of Hearts works well if you run her smaller 2-cost version, allowing her to come out earlier and provide some card draw. Normally, decks like Ruby Amethyst don't really want to challenge in very often at all, so Queen of Hearts can feel pretty lackluster. But as we all know, any Amber deck with Rapunzel loves to challenge in for those tasty card draw heals. So in Amber Ruby, you can double down on those heals with Queen of Hearts. And finally, to wrap up our card coverage, we do have that 1-2 punch of the Mickey Mouse duo. Not only are these 2 cards great on their own or when working together, they're also some of the best cards you can find with Mufasa, turning up the lore pressure even more as they demand a response. Otherwise, it's game over. Alright, I think it's time we jump into some games and show off the deck. Here's the full deck list I'll be playing with today. You can see I'm testing out a few of those considerations, like the Floodborn Queen of Hearts over some other choices, and during these matches I'll try my best to give some insight into how I like to play this deck. I've included 3 matches today against top lists, and I'll walk through my decisions as I play so you can learn how to pilot the awesome power of Mufasa. Enjoy. In this first game, you'll see my general mulligan strategy right off the bat. I keep my Mother Gothel and character ramp tools of Doc and Lantern. The goal here is to find Rapunzel and Mufasa on the throwback. However, Stitch, or the small Queen of Hearts, are also good as they help against opposing aggro decks. I ink Simba first, as I prefer to play either Gothel or Lantern on 2, and my opponent shows off their colors of Amber and Amethyst. It looks like I'm up against an aggro list after all. After they shift in their commanding queen, I play out Doc, and now on turn 4 I can respond with Maui, or on turn 5 I could hit the Gothel Rapunzel combo early if I draw Rapunzel. They quest again with their queen, so I do indeed take her out with Maui. Normally I'd ink Queen of Hearts here and save Surfer Mini, especially against these ink colors that can't take her out very easily. But I hold Queen of Hearts in this case because she can take out either one of their shift targets here if they decide to leave them vulnerable. They get out their Rockstar Stitch and take out Maui, but now I'm free to respond cleanly with Lady Tremaine. I think their best move there was to hold both of their characters, preventing the Lady Tremaine or a second Maui from taking out Stitch. Instead, they lose their major card draw tool before making use of him, and now I have great characters on board. Like I said before, I know they don't have many removal options in Amber Amethyst, so I can now treat this game like a lore race, flooding out my characters and seeing if they can keep up. You can see how this deck is essentially an aggro deck in many matchups. Here I use Hades to bring back the Tremaine after trading her in for the Queen, and now I have her back in my hand for removal on the next turn. Here they decide to play out Pinocchio, finding another one of their aggro questers, but it's too late. I can simply trade in here and play Lady Tremaine out again to banish the solo Pinocchio, drawing out their surrender. In this next game, I stick to the plan of holding Doc and Gothel, tossing the rest back for Rapunzel or my turn 1 Stitch. I also keep Maui as I had been running into a lot of aggro decks. You can change up your mulligan in a similar way to react to your opponent's deck, especially in a best of 3 where you know what you're up against and you aren't going in blind. I don't find Rapunzel this time either, but I still have some great cards to work with here. It seems like they also didn't find their ideal opening, as I see a few Amethyst cards get inked, but nothing played just yet. Finally, they play out their Surfer Mini, confirming the Amethyst Ruby list, but by now I've found my Rapunzel, so I heal up Gothel and draw 3. Now I've equalized cards in hand, but I've also been able to build a strong board in the process, so I'm feeling pretty good here. I'm also feeling good because of the multiple Hades in hand, plus the Mufasa found off the card draw. I'll finally get to show off Mufasa in his own deck, and he's a great character to play down prior to a turn 7 Be Prepared. My opponent takes out Stitch, so I can't shift into Rockstar, and now I have a few options of what to do next. It is a Mufasa deck after all, so I go ahead and play him out while questing with everyone else. Now I'm really turning up the pressure on them, and since they are 2 turns out from a board wipe with Be Prepared, they simply can't wait and have to answer now, swinging in with everything on board plus a Maui. I continue questing, but also establish my lantern on board and get back Rapunzel with Hades. They trade back using Maui and Fox to rush down Gothel and Mufasa, and Mufasa spits out my own Surfer Mini, which isn't bad at all. I know they have Maui back in their hand, but she can quest without fear. But since they're about to hit 7 ink, I know Be Prepared is on the horizon, so I simply bring back Mufasa with Hades and quest. If they want to wipe out my Hades, I can just loop them both back, beginning with the one in my hand. Be Prepared comes down and I throw out Mufasa again, happy to receive their Lady Tremaine that would typically respond to a single character. They do take my Mufasa out with a Pinocchio Maui combo, and Mufasa sends out my Queen of Hearts, not the best choice. I could take down Maui with Queen of Hearts here, but since I'm at 16 lore and they only have 2 cards in their hand, I simply quest and loop back my Hades to potentially set up lethal after the following turn. They follow up with a bit of a board flood, but on my turn I go to 18 and play out Mufasa. Now even in the event of a board wipe, there's a good chance he'll send something out that can end the game for me. My opponent is able to take out my Mufasa with their dragon, and although he only sends out Stitch New Dog, it's enough to take the victory. In this third match, I keep Stitch and Mufasa in the mulligan and draw into a fantastic opening hand. I have Stitch for turn 1, followed by the Gothel, Doc, and Rapunzel in the next few turns, or I could use Doc for the early Mufasa. My opponent inks Befuddle and plays Minnie Mouse, so it seems like I'm against an aggro version of Ruby Amethyst. I continue with my game plan as described, which is the main opener for the deck, playing out Gothel and then following up with Doc on the next turn. My opponent matches with their own typical sequence, bouncing back their 1-3 with Madame Mim Snake, and then bouncing that back again on 3 with Madame Mim Fox. Here I'm expecting them to take out Stitch, and I want to trade back with Gothel after I heal her for card draw with Rapunzel, but instead they use Fox to sing Friends on the other side. They then bounce their Fox back and play out Magic Broom. Brooms have seen some recent play, especially from top Pixelborn players, but their deck is still seeming a bit odd. I simply heal and draw with Rapunzel as planned, and continue on, ready to drop down the Mufasa soon. Since I have a second Rapunzel in my hand here, I decide to play Lantern and then use Hades to return that Mother Gothel for another future combo. What I love about this interaction is it actually benefits from my opponent taking down my Mother Gothel in the first place, and the Gothel plus Rapunzel play on the same turn is a combo that my opponent can't avoid unless they're running a discard deck. My opponent draws cards of their own with Merlin Rabbit and use their Snake to take out Stitch. It turns out I don't need Mother Gothel after all, since I can now simply heal up my first Rapunzel here to draw 3 after she trades into Snake. Now I can play out this Surfer Mini I just drew, and suddenly I'm threatening to go to 15 lore on the next turn if left unchecked. They challenge in with Rabbit, I assume to scout for Be Prepared, but it looks like they had it already in their hand. So I wonder why they didn't just quest with Merlin Rabbit here, but I can quickly build it back with Hades, pulling back one of my Rapunzels to pair with my Gothel I grabbed back previously. They slam another Be Prepared here, but you can see the power of Hades into this matchup. I simply reset them back on board using the third Hades in my hand, and I treat the turn as if it had never happened. After they draw some cards off Yzma, I take her out with Lady Tremaine and begin to threaten 14 total lore on the next turn. This pressure pulls out their third Be Prepared, and you can see now just how this deck can deal with all the Ruby removal if allowed to set up. I refill the board and my hand now with the Gothel Rapunzel combo plus another Hades. They're forced to draw cards by any means here to find their fourth Be Prepared, or perhaps they're Maleficent Dragons, because they have to answer what I'm throwing out, and I haven't even dropped Mufasa down yet. If he were on board during those Be Prepareds, they might have been in even more trouble by this point. Finally, I do throw Mufasa out and decide to go hard on the board here. After all, they would need to scout their fourth board wipe if they want to stop me from this point on. They do fend off lethal and throw out their goat, but they can't stop me on the following turn, so I take the victory. Alright, and that's all I have for now. I was able to record those matches about a week ago before vacation, so if you want to see more now that I'm back home and can play more, let me know in the comments. I think this deck is probably my favorite list to play in Lorcana right now, so I encourage you all to check it out for yourselves and try out some of those picks. I didn't get to show off Namari in those matches. In fact, I don't think I even drew her, but she's quite good and worth testing. I also need to play around with the Mickey duo more, as they have been pretty good in the few games I did play with them, and I could see them becoming a more permanent inclusion in all the Mufasa lists. But anyways, with that, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to drop me a like if you did, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.